Chapter 1. Many people believe there is no God because they are convinced that science has fully explained how our universe came to be. If there is a natural explanation of our origins, they think, who needs a supernatural one? Perhaps, like many, you see a contest between science and religion, and believe that science has been declared the winner, hands down. But does science alone explain this incredibly beautiful and complex creation in which we live? Doesn't its magnificence make you wonder? How does the sun provide just the right amount of energy to light and heat our planet? What makes everything in our orderly world work so well together? How is it that we can predict the precise day of a full moon or an eclipse, or determine whether to expect a violent thunderstorm or a fresh snowfall? Where does lightning come from, or a brilliant rainbow? When we see the startling colors of a sunset, we often wonder how such a spectacular display is created. We marvel at the grandeur of mountains and the beauty of beaches. As I saw the Grand Canyon for the first time, my jaw dropped. The canyon's vastness was awe-inspiring, and its colors were truly amazing. Where did that canyon come from? Every time we look at something built by man, a house, for example, we know it had a builder, someone who assembled it. When we see something that is designed, like a watch, we know it had a designer who planned it. When we see artwork, like a painting, we know there is an artist who painted it. When we observe order, say 20 Coke cups lined up in a row, we know there was an orderer who set them up that way. When we look around the universe at things not made by man, what do we see? We see creation, design, art, and order. So if everything man made has a creator, designer, artist, or orderer behind it, why would we not think that there is a creator, designer, artist, and orderer behind the universe? Why is it that when we look at Mount Rushmore, we don't say, wow, erosion is an amazing thing? Look how it formed the heads of 4 presidents of the United States. We realize that would be a foolish statement. Whenever we see creation, design, art, or order, it's obvious that there was some intelligent force behind it to make it happen. I speak in many venues around the country, so I fly a lot. Once, on the drive from the airport, I saw a beautiful sunset, one of those amazing Technicolor displays that keeps changing like a kaleidoscope. I began to pray that someone would see that beautiful sunset and wonder who painted it in the sky. The following night was Halloween. I was staying with some friends who had a very large house, set back from the road quite a distance. No one had come to the house for candy that night, until there was a ring at the door at around 9:30. As the lady of the house went to answer it, I stuck my head around the corner to take a peek. At the door were 2 young ladies, their faces painted like cats. They looked a bit too old to be trick-or-treating, so I asked them their ages. They said they were 20 and 21. I asked them what they were doing trick-or-treating, and of course they said they wanted some candy. After chatting a few minutes, I brought up a question about eternity. One girl responded, "You're wasting your time talking to us about God. We're atheists." So I asked them what evidence they had found to prove that there is no God. They didn't have any evidence at all, which I found very interesting. Like many people, they were probably thinking that reason was on their side. Yet without any evidence to support their belief, what they actually had was blind faith. And they were using that as the basis for their eternal destiny. Some people think it takes blind faith to believe in God. but we use calculated faith for most decisions in life, and we should do the same for our decisions about eternity. I asked them what would be enough evidence to prove to them that God exists. They didn't have an answer for that either, so I told them I would give them something to think about, and I explained the concept that the universe displays creation, design, art, and order. I asked them, if everything else has a creator, designer, artist, or orderer behind it, why would you think that there is not a creator, designer, artist, and orderer behind this universe? Suddenly their eyes grew wide. One of the young ladies said, yesterday I walked outside at dusk and saw a gorgeous sunset, and I was wondering to myself, who painted that in the sky? Within 24 hours of my prayer, I got to meet someone with whom God had answered that prayer. Both young ladies were students at a local art college. As artists, they knew that for every beautiful painting there must be a painter who created that artwork, and logically the same would have to hold true for all that is in this incredible universe. Logically, we know that there cannot be an unpainted painting, an unsculpted sculpture, an undesigned design. That just doesn't make sense. And it makes much less sense for us to base our eternal destiny on something that we know is not reasonable. I was talking with a man one day in downtown Atlanta, and I asked him a question about spiritual matters. He replied that he was an atheist, and that there was no way to prove that there is a God. We were standing among tall buildings, so I pointed to one of the skyscrapers and said, prove to me that there was a builder for that building. He answered, that's easy. The building itself is proof that there is a builder. He was 100% correct. We know that you don't just gather some concrete, pipes, windows, paint, wires, etc., then turn around and look back to suddenly find a building. A building requires a builder. I said, exactly. The building is proof that there is a builder. I then added, the sun, the moon, the stars, the oceans, the sand, each unique snowflake, the 3 billion pieces of your DNA that are different from mine, are absolute proof that there had to be a creator of this universe. He looked at me. I could see the light bulb flash on behind his eyes, and then he glanced away. As he thought about that statement, he realized he had provided his own proof. The fact that you can't see, touch, taste, smell, or hear the builder of a skyscraper doesn't mean that such a person doesn't exist. You don't need any amazing faith to believe there was a builder of a building you can see. You just need to look at the evidence and make an informed decision. And the best piece of evidence you could have is the work that builder left behind. The same holds true for the God of this universe. The evidence left for us to look at is all the evidence we will ever need in order to know that our universe has a creator. Something from nothing. Imagine this scenario. Billions of years ago, a dark substance began to evolve from nothing. It came out of nowhere. Then there was a big bang. We don't know what caused the bang or why, but it happened. As many millions of years passed, this substance developed a fizz to it and became sweet. Millions of years later, some aluminum molecules formed from nothing, gathered together, and wrapped themselves around this liquid in the perfect shape of a cylinder. The aluminum then formed a pop top on the cylinder. 40 or 50 years ago, some red and white paint molecules fell onto the can, forming the words Coca-Cola, an expiration date, and a complete ingredient list. Wow, that is amazing. This example given by a friend of mine describes an absurd way of thinking. It would be an insult to your intellect if I insisted that the above scenario were true. The universe is infinitely more complex than a can of Coke. Yet for some reason, people are content to believe that it just came out of nowhere, that something came from nothing. But if a Coke can and its contents couldn't happen by random chance processes, how could something as orderly and as intricately designed as our universe have been assembled merely by chance? Logically, we know that's impossible. One night I noticed a youth football practice going on across the street from where I was speaking, so I went over and began a conversation with a man who was there to watch his sons play. As we chatted, he told me that he was Jewish. We talked a little about the Jewish faith, and he mentioned that not only was he not practicing his faith, he was actually an atheist. I found a Jewish atheist to be a very interesting combination. It was a beautiful night, nice and chilly, with a bright moon and a canopy of stars. I asked him, "When you see this beautiful creation on a night like tonight, doesn't it make you think of the Creator who made this place?" He admitted, "That's what I am struggling with." He was struggling because he knew, when he looked at the sky, that this awesome creation had to come from somewhere. Someone created it, but the question is, who? Many people don't believe that a God created the universe because they can't imagine a being that is eternal. Surely God must have a beginning, they think. Where did he come from? Who made him? If they don't have satisfactory answers, then they refuse to believe. I find it interesting that before coming up with the Big Bang Theory, scientists believed that the universe was eternal. They couldn't explain how it came into being by itself, so they claimed that it simply always was. It had no beginning. Scientists now proclaim that the universe began with a Big Bang, but that provides more questions than it does answers. There had to be something to go bang. Where did the matter come from? What energy source caused the bang? What was the catalyst that set the matter into motion to form the universe? How could order have come from disorder? Think about that. If you believe matter existed for all eternity, and it had the ability to spontaneously start up the universe, and it was powerful and intelligent enough to put our immense universe together with order and precision and beauty, haven't you just defined God? He's not as difficult to believe in as you may have thought. You might not understand him, but that's no reason to believe that he doesn't exist. As I came home late one evening, I turned on the TV and saw the David Letterman show was on. His guest was an 80-year-old scientist from England, who had just won the Nobel Prize. I loved the British accent, so I was drawn to listen to the conversation. The scientist made the statement, "David, we have reached the point in science where we know for a fact that there was a beginning to this universe." Letterman suddenly straightened up in his chair and looked with surprise at his guest. He said, "Wait a minute. Wait just a minute. If we know that there is a beginning to this universe, doesn't that imply—" How would you have finished that sentence if you were speaking? Some people might say, "Doesn't that imply that there is an end to the universe?" But Letterman continued, "Doesn't that imply that there must be a beginner to this universe?" As you see, our mind logically leads us to conclude that if there was a beginning, then there must be a beginner to this universe. Someone to set it all in motion. The scientist's response was amazing. He stared at the floor for a moment, then looked at Letterman and replied, "That is a place that we don't like to go to in science." What an incredible admission. He was stating that because he was a scientist, he didn't want to even think about it. We can choose to turn off our logic in our search for truth as we journey through life, but I don't believe that is a very wise thing to do. Like Letterman, we know intuitively that beginnings require beginners. Cause and effect. There is something in science called the law of cause and effect. This is an indisputable, universal law that says that for every material effect, there had to be a cause. There is nothing in the universe that doesn't have a cause behind its existence. Your parents caused you, your grandparents caused your parents, etc. But if you continue going further and further back, there will not be an infinite regression. You must eventually reach a first cause, or an uncaused cause, which created that first effect. Something that doesn't just come out of nothing all by itself. In other words, there had to be some casual agent that began the process and set our whole universe in motion. Robert Jastrow, founder of the Goddard Institute for Space Studies at NASA, acknowledges this requirement. The universe and everything that has happened in it since the beginning of time are a grand effect without a known cause. An effect without a cause, that is not the world of science. It is a world of witchcraft, of wild events, and the whims of demons, a medieval world that science has tried to banish. Even Charles Darwin admitted the impossibility of conceiving that this grand and wondrous universe, with our conscious selves, arose through chance, seems to me the chief argument for the existence of God. I am aware that if we admit a first cause, the mind still craves to know whence it came and how it arose. Some scientists may not like to admit what that casual agent might be, yet according to this law, it is irrefutable that everything that has a beginning has a cause, including the universe. The universe cannot simply bring itself into being. It requires a cause that is outside itself. Scholar C.S. Lewis wrote in God and the Dog, "An egg which came from no bird is no more natural than a bird which had existed from all eternity. And since the egg-bird-egg sequence leads us to no plausible beginning, is it not reasonable to look for the real origin somewhere outside the sequence altogether? You have to go outside the sequence of engines into the world of men to find the real originator of the rocket. Is it not equally reasonable to look outside nature for the real originator of the natural order?" What do you think? Louis Pasteur, the famous scientist, said of our world, "The more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator." His logic convinced him that our complex orderly creation requires a creator. Sir Isaac Newton stated, "This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being." You may find it hard to believe that God can make everything out of nothing, but the alternative is that nothing turned itself into everything, which takes more faith to believe. Evidence of design. As we've seen with the Coke can example, blind, random chance does not give rise to design. You will never hear of a tornado whipping through a junkyard and leaving a fully formed 747 jet, a Mercedes, and a skyscraper in its wake. Why? Blind chance cannot do that. If you placed all the pieces of a watch into a shoebox and shook it for 10 minutes, do you believe it would shake into a functioning watch? Of course not. What if you shook it for a year? Would a functioning watch then come out of the box? Say you were able to shake it for 5 billion years. Would you then have a functioning watch? There is no possible way for that to happen. And if it couldn't happen by chance to something relatively simple like a watch, it most certainly couldn't happen by chance to our magnificently complex universe. Consider some of the amazing aspects of design that are evident in our solar system. The Earth is positioned at just the right distance from the Sun so that we receive exactly the proper amount of heat to support life. The other planets of our solar system are either too close to the Sun, too hot, or else too far, too cold to sustain life. Any appreciable change in the rate of rotation of the Earth would make life impossible. For example, if the Earth were to rotate at 1/10 of its present rate, all plant life would either be burned to a crisp during the day or frozen at night. Temperature variations are kept within reasonable limits due to the near circular orbit of the Earth around the Sun. The Moon revolves around the Earth at a distance of about 240,000 miles, causing harmless tides on the Earth. If the Moon were located at 1/5 of this distance away, the continents would be completely submerged twice a day. The thickness of the Earth's crust and depth of the oceans appear to be carefully designed. Increases in thickness or depth of only a few feet would so drastically alter the absorption of free oxygen and carbon dioxide that plant and animal life could not exist. The Earth's axis is tilted 23 degrees from the perpendicular to the plane of its orbit. This tilting, combined with the Earth's revolution around the Sun, causes our seasons, which are absolutely essential for the raising of food supplies. The Earth's atmosphere, especially the ozone layer, serves as a protective shield from the lethal solar ultraviolet radiation, which would otherwise destroy all life. The Earth's atmosphere also serves to protect the Earth by burning up approximately 20 million meteors each day that enter it at speeds of about 30 miles per second. Without this crucial protection, the danger to life would be immense. Two primary constituents of the Earth's atmosphere are nitrogen, 78%, and oxygen, 20%. This delicate and critical ratio is essential to all life forms. The Earth's magnetic field provides important protection from harmful cosmic radiation. All of this happened just by chance? I think someone would have to commit intellectual suicide to believe that. What does your logic say as you consider the evidence? Even well-known astrophysicist Stephen Hawking concluded, "The universe and the laws of physics seem to have been specifically designed for us. If any one of about 40 physical qualities had more than slightly different values, life as we know it could not exist. Either atoms would not be stable, or they wouldn't combine into molecules, or the stars wouldn't form the heavier elements, or the universe would collapse before life could develop, and so on." Unlike the gentleman on David Letterman's show, many scientists have been willing to honestly, logically weigh the evidence and have determined that blind chance cannot be given credit for creating our highly ordered universe. Though he remains an evolutionist, Hawking admitted, "It would be very difficult to explain why the universe should have begun in just this way except as an act of God, who intended to create beings like us." Consider the conclusions other scientists have reached about the universe's design. Sir Fred Hoyle, British astrophysicist, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers 1 calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. Paul Davies, Australian astrophysicist. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. Alan Sandage, the greatest living cosmologist and winner of the Crawford Prize in astronomy. The world is too complicated in all its parts and interconnections to be due to chance alone. I am convinced that the existence of life with all its order is simply too well put together. John O'Keefe, NASA astronomer. We are, by astronomical standards, a pampered, cosseted, cherished group of creatures. If the universe had not been made with the most exacting precision, we could never have come into existence. It is my view that these circumstances indicate the universe was created for man to live in. Arno Penzias, Nobel Prize winner in physics. Astronomy leads us to a unique event. A universe which was created out of nothing, one with the very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. George Greenstein, astronomer. As we survey all the evidence, the thought insistently arises that some supernatural agency, or rather agency, must be involved. Is it possible that suddenly, without intending to, we have stumbled upon scientific proof of the existence of a supreme being? Was it God who stepped in and so providentially crafted the cosmos for our benefit? Albert Einstein, one of the greatest scientists of all time, said, "I want to know how God created this world." Maybe his desire is something all of us should ponder as we survey the evidence. Moral law. Another argument for God's existence is the reality of moral law. Man is a moral being, but evolution cannot explain where our sense of morality comes from. How can we know intuitively that something is wrong unless there is a right? Why do right and wrong exist? Our moral nature can also be seen in our desire for justice. Although we don't always do what is right ourselves, we certainly don't have any trouble knowing when we've been wronged. And when that happens, we demand that justice be done. This moral law that humans live by had to come from somewhere. But where? Mindless random chance processes cannot explain the existence of a moral code. The moral code is also related to the law of cause and effect, which we looked at earlier. This law dictates that an effect never precedes its cause, and is never greater than or superior to its cause. Therefore, there must be something that existed before the universe was brought into being, and that cause must be superior to our awesome universe in every way. As with a building, the universe exhibits design, so it must have a designer. Since it exhibits intelligence, its designer must be intelligent. Since it has life, its designer must have life. And since it exhibits morality, its designer must be moral. When you really get down to it, it takes more faith to believe that there is no God than to believe that there is a God. How could matter come into being by itself from nothing? How could an effect come from no cause? How could life come from a non-life? How could intelligence come from non-intelligence? How could meaning come from meaninglessness? These are all things that an atheist must believe in order to be consistent, and they all contradict the irrefutable law of cause and effect. How does that sit with your logic? Always base your decisions on evidence, facts, and truth. Don't just go with feelings when making decisions. Feelings may be important in some aspects of life, but they do not determine what is true. When the ice beneath you is beginning to thicken, when considering the evidence from creation, design, art, order, science, and moral law, it is obvious that our search for eternal truth is beginning to narrow. In the next chapter, we will look more closely at the design process for our universe. Then in chapter 3, we will consider who this designer might be. End of chapter 1.